I started this message, this little teaching called The Wisdom of Money. So I'm going to kind of refresh the introduction a little bit, and then we'll get on to what I call the laws. I've got 4 laws on the wisdom of money. We had seen a little bit from Romans chapter 5. You guys can turn there. And it's kind of a little different twist to what generally is spoken of in Romans chapter 5. But I find a lot of times as I study the Word of God, you can almost apply the principles to everything. I mean, you can apply it to your health, or you can apply it to your money, or you can apply it to your relationship with your mom, or your relationship with your neighbor. There seems like the Word of God is so all-inclusive that you can just kind of take all that God is saying and apply that to a lot of different areas. And that same Scripture works in all those different areas. Like given it shall be given. Well, that could be money. It could be a cake to your neighbor. It could be a little bit of your time to go tell somebody that you love them and everything is going to be okay. You've given something. So, but this Scripture is all-inclusive. It covers a lot of different areas. In Romans chapter 5, verses 1 through 5, there's 4 key words used in this second series on the wisdom of money, second tape in the series. The 4 words are tribulation, patience, experience, and hope. Romans chapter 5, verses 1 through 5. Tribulation, patience, experience, and hope. Well, how in the world does this apply to money? You ever heard a little terminology called, I'd like to have it now? I want it right now. Or we just kind of like the neighbor's car and you'd kind of like to have one just like it? I'm a home builder, so I understand neighborhoods. And one of the things that I've learned about people, you'll see a guy build a little building in the back. And then about 3 doors down, another guy, he builds a building in the back. But his is just a little fancier. See, he had a little time to research on that guy's mistakes. And then very long, and about 8 doors down, that guy gets another building. And then long, and there's another guy across the street, he builds a garage. I've seen this for years. We hear the term, keep up with the Joneses. Well, see, it's that philosophy that's got America into its mess. It's that philosophy that has violated the wisdom of money. Because so oftentimes, people get into things that they have no business getting into. They're not ready for it. They're financially not in a position that they need to be doing that. And one of the criteria that I have learned in the realm of money and things, which in essence, money is in essence a medium of exchange. That's all that it is. Now, God says it pretty strong. He says the love of money, He didn't say the money is, did He? He said the love of money is the root of all evil. He didn't say money was. He said the love of the money was. You can take a bottle of whiskey and you can set it right here on this table right here, and that bottle of whiskey costs about, $15, $20 or whatever there. And boy, what kind of destruction in America has happened from the whiskey, right? Well, is it the whiskey? It's a love of whiskey. It's what somebody allows the whiskey to do to them. And money is the same way. See, we look at money differently because it don't make you drunk, don't give you cancer, it doesn't do, money doesn't commit certain types of sins, in a sense, because it's not doing it. But it's the love and the attitude toward that money which creates, according to the Bible, all sin. That's pretty strong, isn't it? Well, if the love of money is the root of all evil, then it surely would lead me to believe that we ought to understand what money is. And you don't hear any teaching on money. You know, I was talking to a school teacher the other day, and I said, you know, it's really interesting. I went through 12 years of high school, or 12 years of grade school and high school, and then I went 6 years to college. And I never ever had a course on the common sense of finance. I mean, we put these kids in the industrial arts and mathematics and how to dissect a frog and how to do all these things that we want these kids to be educated on. And when they graduate from college, high school, what's the first thing they got? What's the first thing they do? They make a financial decision. Do you buy a car? You got to get a job. You got to buy your own clothes. And all of a sudden, everything that kid does from that day on deals with money. And yet the kid's never been taught anything about it. He's never been taught, well, now this is what you need to do. Now, when you make your income, you take your $400 or your whatever, and you're going to have Uncle Sam, you're going to pay Uncle Sam. Okay? And then you're going to take your $300, and you ought to do this. You ought to put a little in here, and a little in here, and a little in here, and put this all together, and then be patient. Romans chapter 5, verse 2, by whom also we have access by faith into this grace wherein we stand and rejoice in hope of the glory of God. And not only so, but we glory in tribulation, also knowing that tribulation worketh patience, and patience experience, and experience hope. Now, how does that little verse there tie in to some kid going to school and graduating from high school? How does that tie in? Would we all agree that probably our number one problem in America is debt? Would we agree that our number one problem in America is debt? If we look at a nation as a whole, I realize we can say, well, no, it's sin, and it's but I'm saying, in all reality, if the love of money is the root of all evil, then we have to look at the debt which is related to money as a great part of that problem. Look at all the things that happen in our society as a result of our debt. Look at all the sin, the robbery, the lust, the better than thou attitude. They got to have it now. The Lord said, knowing that tribulation, now I want you to write this down, tribulation equals pressure. Okay? Tribulation equals pressure. Knowing that pressure worketh patience, and patience experience, and experience hope. I find that people are constantly making decisions, and oftentimes when we make decisions, the first thing that comes to our life is pressure. or tribulation as a result of that decision. People get into pressure. And that pressure can be unbelievably overwhelming. The tribulation, the pressure. And yet God says that tribulation, that pressure is going to come. Let's take a simple example here. That got to have it now attitude that we were talking about a little earlier. Where does that come from? Where does that attitude got to have it now? Do you know why we're in our debt in America? It's one sentence. Got to have it now. People say, well, no, my kids, I hear it all the time. Well, my kids, they both need to work jobs because they can't make ends meet. Well, is it the ends that need to be met, or is your expectations that need to be met? You got to have the car, and you got to have the this, and you got to have the that. Now, one thing we do need to have, and one of the reasons I'm in the home building business, and I feel really good about being in it, is you need to have a place to live. You got to have that. You're either going to pay rent or you're going to pay a mortgage. One way or the other, you're going to pay something. But, do you need to have a new car? I used to drive $600 cars. That's what I had cash for. And I'd take my $600 and I'd pay the cash for it, and I'd drive that thing till it blew up. Then I'd call the wrecker for $25. They'd haul it to the junkyard. I'd go over to the car dealership, and I'd say, you got another one of them station wagons? He said, yeah, we got one right back over there. I said, how much you want for it? Oh, I'll take $450 for that. I said, here's $450, and I'll go drive it, and it'd drive it till it blew up. And I think in that introduction, I talked about that just a little bit. I could afford a whole lot more. But you know what? Those old cars never caused me any pressure. We're going to have those tribulations, and we're going to have pressure. And those tribulations and that pressure doesn't just come from making financial decisions, but that's the realm I'm kind of talking about tonight, because it is probably the realm that I find that most people are struggling with. And I deal with a lot of people. We have thousands of people go through our offices every year, and we get to talk to these kids and these older people and all the combinations from 20 years old to 80 years old. And the one underlying thing that keeps coming back is the foolish decisions that they made and the unbelievable pressure that they are under as a result of those decisions. And yet in our high schools, we've never taught these kids how to be wise with their money. They're careless, they're slothful, they make decisions that bring them under pressure. Bankruptcies are running rampant all across America. It's unbelievable. It's staggering. Things that, the stock market's going out of sight, but bankruptcies are too. Isn't that interesting? There's an old saying, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Do you know why God used to have a year of Jubilee? They talk about the year of Jubilee in the Old Testament. It was a 50th year. Every 50 years, God would make everybody that had property give it back to the people they got it from, and everybody had to restore to everybody everything that they had, and God kind of spread it all back out again, and then He waited another 50 years. You know why? Because there's always going to be a group of aggressive, hardworking people that are going to take it all. And if He didn't have a year of Jubilee, most people would just be absolutely stark raving poor. And that was God. God did that for the nation Israel. A year of Jubilee every 50 years. And as I look around the society, there's a group of people that are very aggressive, and we're not even talking about Christianity here. I mean, these people are aggressive, and they're going at it. I mean, they're going to have it all. You know, Bill Gates was talking about, he had a seminar, and I took a lot of notes on that seminar. And it's unbelievable, the biblical principles that he walks in, and yet he says, I don't know God, but he said, someday I'm going to make a chip, and I'll find out who he is.
Oh, my land.
He's the richest man in America. He's 40 years old. He don't know God from a red hat. So we know that making money is just not a Christian thing. If it was, how does he have it? If it was, how does the world have so much? So we know it isn't just a Christian thing. But we do know we have some promises from the Lord. And we do know that if we'll stand on those promises, He'll honor it. And He'll fulfill His word with whatever He said about money. Whatever that promise may be. Tribulation or pressure works patience. Is that what it says here? Verse 3. And knowing that tribulation or pressure worketh patience. So we do know there can be some great positive effects from this pressure we allow ourselves to get into. Because it says it works patience. But somebody says, but how long do I have to wait? Now, God, I stepped out into this thing, and I'm believing you for this thing. And isn't 99% of what we believe God for? Money. We'll throw in healing every now and then, or grandma getting saved or something. But most of what we believe God for, somehow or another, hinges around finances. Maybe you just believe in God to give a lot of money away this year. Maybe you're believing God for that new car, that new house, that new this, that new that, the new clothes. Just maybe for shelter and clothing for your family. But you believe in God for the money. But he says that tribulation makes you patient. Why would that be important? Why would it be important that the pressure of life is there to do something of benefit to us? And yet, most people are running from it, aren't they? Are most people running from pressure or tribulation? They don't want it. They pray, oh, God, get this thing off of me. I remember when I was in a church years and years ago when I was a kid, I remember this lady come up and say, oh my goodness, whatever you do, don't pray for patience. Why? Because, man, all these trials just came at me, man. I'm telling you what. And she was just all whacked out of shape about that. I remember that like it was yesterday. Don't do that. Don't pray. Oh, whatever you do, don't pray for patience. But God says, knowing that tribulation worketh patience, and patience experience. You know how many times in my lifetime I've called back on those times when I have stepped out and believed God for something? And I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and I kept my mouth right. I kept my heart right. I didn't gripe and complain. I didn't want to walk around Mount Sinai griping and complaining. I kept standing. I kept waiting. I kept waiting. I kept standing. I kept standing. I kept waiting. I kept standing. I kept standing. Then I kept waiting. And then I waited a little longer. And then I waited a little bit more. And then I waited just a whole lot more. And then I waited another year. And I said, God, are you, hello, you out there? You ever feel like that? Are you out there? Are you real? And you wait, and you wait. And what's happening? What's happening during that process? You know, sun can do two things. It can melt butter, or it can harden clay. Still the same sun. And what's the benefit of standing, and in all things rejoice. In all things rejoice. In all things rejoice. Well, wait a minute now. Hold it, God. Hold it just a minute. Now, in all things? No, you know, I had that bill due last Friday, and today's Tuesday, and I still don't have the money. I'm supposed to rejoice about that? Hold it. Now, that don't happen to everybody. It just happens to me. Why me? Why me? Poor me. Me, my, and mine. Why is it happening to me? I don't understand this, God. Well, Joe down the street don't have that problem. He's a dark raving heathen, gets drunk every night. He don't have that problem. You don't have any idea what Joe's problem is. We're just all feeling sorry for ourselves, aren't we? We're all in a pity party. We need to keep our mouths shut, stay in the pressure, and believe God. Now, there's times when we do things foolishly. Maybe borrowing for the car we shouldn't have borrowed for. And that's put us under undue pressure. And we're going to discuss that just a little bit tonight. That's our law number 1. We are in a position in our lives every day to deal with pressure. And I believe this. I believe whether you step out or you don't step out in faith, you're going to deal with pressure. And I've always said it this way. If I'm going to deal with it, I may as well just go out in faith. At least I got something to get back. But if all I do is just survive and go to work at Ford and just hang in there or whatever and never step out in faith, I'm still going to have pressure. It's unbelievable. Go out to any factory in this town, and I guarantee you walk up and down those aisles and you've got pressure to the max. We got pressure in our marriages. We got pressure in relationships. We got pressure in our church. My goodness, everybody knows in this town the amount of splits and struggles that we've had in this town with churches. Is that pressure? What does that do to the people that are going there? What does it do to the pastor? What does that do to the businessman who's financially struggling because of this or because of that? There's a lot of that pressure has come as a result, and once again, the debt in America has created a huge amount of pressure. Bankruptcy is one of the greatest, it's one of the top 5 things that happen in a person's life that's destructive to that person's life. Divorce is another one. The loss of a loved one. They're all like, those 3 are in the top 5. And bankruptcy, in my opinion, is nothing more than somebody succumbing to the pressure. Because they can't see with their eyes the other side of the mountain. All they can see is another mountain. You ever seen those movies where these guys are in a crash or something, you know, and they're trying to go through the snow and they're freezing and they know if they can just get to the top of that one mountain, they'll be able to see the city on the other side. And they, you know, and they're just barely making it, just barely surviving, and finally they get to the top of the mountain, all I see is more mountain ranges. You ever seen those kind of shows? That's where people are. They file bankruptcy. If they can just get this one thing to work, and they're climbing this mountain and climbing this mountain, and they get to the top, and all they can see is another mountain range to climb. And they say, I don't want to do this no more, I quit. A lot of the pressures that come on us in life come as a result of the decisions that we make that are not to the positive because of lust, impatience, got to have it now. You see what I'm saying? A lot of the pressures that come into our life are not there to build us up. They're there to destroy us. All pressures are there to destroy us in a sense. But these pressures are not going to be... Let's give you a case in point. I want a new car. Well, I like that $50,000 BMW. I'm going to pay $1,000 on it for the next 70 months. $1,000 a month for 70 months. Or $1,500 a month for 60 months. Because I'm going to have that car. So every month I got this payment. Now I want to ask you something. What's that doing for you? What's that benefiting you?
Pressure on
Putting
you.
pressure on you?
No. You look cool.
Oh, now, hold it. I heard it down at a Zig Ziglar meeting one time. This lady came in and she was real big on what they call image. And she'd just been hired by the Disney company for 3 months to come in and find out why their image is so screwed up. And so she came in there and she did it, she spent 3 months at a who knows what kind of fee to decide why Disney's image is being tarnished. Well, she was down there and she said, now I want everybody in this audience to tell me what kind of car you drive. I want everybody, who drives a Mercedes-Benz? There's some guy. Seriously, I look around, these guys go, you could just see. And some of them would say, well, who drives this and who drives that? And then she said, last year, they sold 3 Rolex watches. You know how much they paid for each? Each? $365,000. Okay, each. Now she said, what is that watch doing for you? Here's a $39 Timex, And what is this $39 Timex? What's it doing for you? It's doing the same thing the Rolex. But what did she say? You look cool. You look cool. You look cool. I want to ask you something. Does looking cool take care of the pressure?
No.
Oh, okay. I just wondered. $365,000 for a watch. And then she said, do you know how when you're driving that Mercedes-Benz down the road, and you're driving it down this particular road, and there happen to be a couple of good-looking girls walking down the sidewalk, and you kind of set up in your seat, kind of threw your shoulders back, kind of hung your hand on the wheel, and you kind of look real cool looking over at them, and they kind of look back and kind of, ooh. And then you took off at the traffic light and you just kind of goosed a little bit, and they squalled the tires just a little bit, and you just cruise on down the road. She said that's just what you paid an extra $100,000 for. She said, I hope the feeling was worth it. Because we all know that you can get into a Chevrolet for about $15,000 that'll probably last as long as a Mercedes-Benz will last. And they give you this, well, they hold their value. You can forget it. I looked into that. They don't hold their value. You can kiss that goodbye. That is not the truth. You can take out a lease on all those expensive cars and even the cheaper cars. They all end up in about 2 or 3 years at about 56%. They don't hold their value. Okay? I'm not against those kind of things, but I'm against the reasons that we do them at times. Okay? And what it does to us. Because our reason for doing it is wrong, and it creates an incredible amount of pressure. If that weren't true, why are so many people going bankrupt? Because they bought an affordable $11,000 Chevrolet? Forget it. They're going out here and they're doing everything they're doing to keep up with everybody else. They have no control of their spending habits. It's everything that they do in that realm is lustful. Their motives are wrong. They got to buy a $40, $50, $60 bottle of perfume instead of Aqua Velva for $5. I mean, it sounds so silly, but you start spending your whole life that way and it isn't long, and it takes you 10 times the amount of money to live the same way you could the other way. I heard a story just recently of a gentleman. He said that his friend was very poor, struggled, worked hard, and pretty soon he was making $200,000 a year. They say he still never had any money. He didn't have any money when he didn't have any money. He didn't have any money when he made $200,000 a year. Because he didn't have any wisdom. He had no wisdom of money. He didn't know what it was all about. And so what he did is he basically just bumped his lifestyle. Instead of going out and spending $4.55 at the Waffle House for a meal. Everything he bought had to be at some fancy restaurant for $30, $40. You know what I'm saying? And those kind of things, they're kind of the extremes, but it doesn't take a lot of extreme from that $5 to get you in trouble. Maybe it's just the fact you got to go out to eat all the time instead of having a 39-cent bologna sandwich at home. That I've had to learn to do because I've had to develop the wisdom of money in my life. If I knew I wanted to get ahead, I had to come up with a way that was wise. And this is the rule of thumb that I use in this realm. I say that the time that you should borrow money is when it will give you a return. Now, isn't it interesting? We'll take and save our money to invest it in the stock market and use our cash. We'll save and say, oh, I got an extra $100. I think I can put it in the stock market. Now, that thing's making you money. But when it comes to the car that costs $30,000, and the day you drive it off the showroom floor, it's worth $20,000, you go borrow for it. And we'd never think about borrowing in a million years to put money in the stock market. But yet that makes a lot more sense to me than borrowing money for a car. And let me give you some scriptures in case you don't have it. Romans chapter 4, verses 17 and 21, it says, God is full able to perform the things that you believed for. Romans chapter 8, verse 32, God freely gives us all things to enjoy. Romans 8, 35 and 37, God has made us more than conquerors. And what exactly are we conquering? The greatest conquering that you'll ever do in your life is your attitude. I know that ain't what we hear so much, but that's the secret to life. I pull I've got a son. Matter of fact, I just came from a ball game. Elida played Lima Senior, the freshman. I got a son that's on the freshman basketball team. And my son happens to be a pretty good basketball player. I still can't beat his dad, but he's pretty good. But Josh has struggled with his attitude a little bit because he gets down fast. So I pull him aside and I say, hey, conqueror, how you doing? And he's like, you know, and when you tell somebody they're more than a conqueror, they start thinking, let's see, did I beat somebody up today? I mean, what the world's he talking about? See, when God said that in all things we're more than conquerors, the greatest thing you'll ever conquer in your life is your attitude. When you have a choice to be critical and you say, no, I cast down that thought and I bring that thought into obedience to the Word of God. For whatsoever things are lovely, 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 10. For whatsoever things are lovely, Philippians chapter 4. Honest, just, pure, and true, and of a good report, if there's any virtue, if there's any praise. I'm going to think on these things. What did you just do? And all these things, you are more than a conqueror through Christ, through the Word of God that just gave you your strength. Patience. Add to tribulation or pressure, patience. That pressure is there to build patience, even if you screw up. It's there to build patience in your life so that you don't screw up again. That's what it means then when it says, and add to your patience experience. Well, what did the experience just do? It just taught you that you screwed up. That pressure was great. I'll get you out of it. May take a little longer if you had to listen than if you would have listened, but I will get you out of it. But that experience that you now have gained and the patience that you have developed will provide you with the hope that you need the next time you get into struggle. The next time pressure comes at you. And see, I've made a choice. this is the major choice I've made. I've always been a believer that a good defense is a good offense. The best defense that you can have against something in your life is a good offense. So I made a choice that here's what I'm going to do. Instead of hanging around waiting for the devil to find me and then kick the tar out of me, I'm going to go out and find him. Why sit back in the tent waiting for the army to come and nail me? I may as well get out of my tent and go get him. Why should I wait? Well, you say, well, how did you go get the devil? Well, I'll go do something like build a house. When everybody says, oh, you can't do that. You'll never sell it. You'll never make it. Why, men better than you have tried and they failed. That really makes you feel good, don't it? So what I do, I go build a house. When I didn't have a job, I went and built a house. And everybody said, well, it's a depression in Lima. This ain't going to work. And I said, I'm going after the devil. What do you mean, man? I wouldn't do that. I'd go hide in a closet somewhere, man. I mean, it's bad out there. Oh, it's terrible out there. You don't want to go out there in this wicked old world, man. You go out there and try and build a spec house in 1983 in Lima, Ohio, I'll guarantee you they'll eat your lunch. Then they'll take your clothes and make you run around the neighborhood without any clothes on. They'll kill you because they don't even like you. They'll nail you. They'll tar and feather you. They'll throw you in jail for the rest of your life. I had all these things go through my mind. It'll never work. And then they'll throw you in jail because you went out and did that stupid thing. You don't have no money. How are you going to get the bills paid? How are you going to make that work? I said, I don't know. But I'm telling you, devil, I'm coming after you. No, I could have done that. Or I could have just said, well, you know, I sure hope something happens. I sure hope God moves someday. Phew. Man, I sure hope God does something soon. You know, maybe in the next 10 or 20 years, I sure hope something happens. And you know, if he don't, I guess I can always file bankruptcy. That's what was going through my head. About 14 years ago. I remember I didn't have a job. Didn't have a job. It was 1983. And I'm the biggest home builder in Ohio. You ain't got a job, Jack. What do you mean the biggest home builder? You ain't nothing. They'll come in and say, you worthless piece of nothing. Why don't you just give up on this craziness? You can see it ain't working. I've been believing for 7 years that God is going to make me the biggest home builder in the state of Ohio. And I was doing pretty good until about 1980 when the recession hit in Lima. Just knocked my feet, my feet went whoop, out from under me, fell on my head. Devil jumped on top of me, pinned me down with his legs, put his hand around my neck, and the other one had a dagger in it and said, boy, you're dead. And I looked at him and I said, devil, I got you right where I want you. And he said, you're out of your mind, man. I said, no, devil, I got you right where I want you. And he's got me pinned to the ground. And he's got the dagger in his hand. But see, when I get myself in that kind of position, when I put myself so vulnerable to the things of God, guess who moves in? When I make myself so vulnerable that the only answer to my life is liberty or death. There's nothing in between. Guess who moves in? Do you think God's going to sacrifice a guy like me that does things like that the world thinks is really stupid? He ain't going to let you fall. But I guarantee he's going to let some patience be worked in you. And then that experience is going to give you some hope. And that hope's going to get you to the next big job. The next big thing that's so much bigger than you are, there ain't no way in a million years it'll ever work. And that's how I've grown. Let pressure build patience, and let patience give you experience, and let experience give you hope. And the hope is the thing that you have when all this is done that takes you to the next level. And then I went and did 2 houses. And I standing in my bedroom in this house I was living in. I had 2 spec houses that were accumulating interest for over 3.5 years. And neither one of them had sold. And I'm Mr. Faith Man. Give me a break. Don't have a job, not a house being built in the whole county. I said, God, would you mind if I moved? I said, I'd kind of like to go to Atlanta or Dallas. I mean, you know, some place where there's some 2x4s being nailed together. And you know what the Lord said? He said, yeah, you can do that if you want. And when he talks to me like that, it's like, I know I'm in trouble. Because what he does is he kind of says, you can have your own way. Now, do you want your way or do you want mine? I said, well, can you kind of help me out a little bit there, Lord, and teach me a little bit about it? And he said, well, he said, you remember what happened to Abraham? I said, well, I'm not sure. What you mean, Lord? He said, well, Abraham and Lot were kind of having this little feud, and Lot kind of wanted to have his own stake in life. So Abraham and Lot kind of had this little debate, and Lot says, I'd kind of like to have my own deal going, God, or Abraham. And Abraham says, well, that's fine. He said, where would you like to go? Where would you like to have some land? I'll give it to you. He said, well, I looked at that land down there beside Sodom and Gomorrah, and it's really good looking stuff. I'd really like to have that land. And Abraham says, well, that's okay. You can have it. But Lot says, but that's the best land you got. He said, no, that's all right. You have it. Take it. And then Abraham said to Lot, he said, well, you're going to need some sheep and some donkeys and some goats and stuff. Well, Lot says, yeah, but you know, I don't want to take too much here. And Abraham says, that's okay. Take what you want. And Lot thought, oh my goodness, take what I want? And Abraham says, yeah, take whatever you want. So Lot told Abraham, he said, well, I'll take all the unblemished. Abraham says, fine, take it. It's yours. Now you take all those lambs and goats and you take that land down there by Sodom and Gomorrah and you just go on your way and have a good time. You know why? Because Abraham wasn't too worried about it because he knew where he got it. He wasn't worried about it. He knew that God was blessing him. Because he told Abraham, God told Abraham a long time ago, he said, I'm going to bless you and then you're going to be a blessing. So when the Lord comes and speaks to me, he says, I want you to give that X amount of thousands of dollars over there. I said, okay. Here. Because I know where I got it. And I know how I got it. Oh yeah, I had to step out in faith, but it wasn't me that made it work. It's God. And I know that. And the Lord said, now you can go to Atlanta or you can go to Dallas, but he said, I don't recommend it. And I'm telling you, the fear of God went through my heart. Now here I'm beat up Lima. I mean, this town is dog city, and I'm a builder. Give me a break. I'd like to go where there's some action. And the Lord told me this. He said, I'm going to teach you how to prosper in a sun-scorched land. Jeremiah. He said, I'm going to teach you to prosper in a sun-scorched land. I was with probably the second biggest builder in this city. His name is Herb Wagner last night, and we talked for 4.5 hours. And I said, there's nobody built more houses in the Lima area than me. And he agreed. Would you guys all agree that Lima's kind of a sun-scorched land? How many times have you seen it written up on the front page of the Lima News that we're the most depressed city in the country, or that we're the cheapest place to live? I mean, those aren't good things, guys. I know they think that's good, but that's not good. That's not positive. That's not a prospering land. But God said, I'm going to teach you how to build and prosper in a sun-scorched land. And so I'm standing in my living room, and I'm going back to the story now. I'm standing in my bedroom. I'm looking out a window in my house on Walpock Road, and it's snowing outside. It's February 1983, and it's snowing. And the Lord said, you see that piece of ground right there? I said, yeah. He said, I want you to build a house. I said, God, do you know my name? I'm Steve Doyle. You remember the guy that ain't got 2 spec houses and the interest is accumulating and I ain't paying any of it for 3.5 years and it's multiplying and compounding? You remember me? Hey, God, you remember me? That's me. You want me to build a house? He wants me to build a house. I don't even have any land. So I want you to build another house. I want you to build it right out there. Now, you know, when you get that kind of thing in your heart, you kind of wonder, am I crazy or what? Or was that the devil or was that God? I mean, who was speaking to me here? I mean, where's this message coming from? I'd like to know. Because sometimes the things that God talks to you about are so crazy. It can't be God. Well, God's more sane than that. So I said, well, I'll start designing something, and you'll have to give me the floor plan. So I started designing a house. And I designed, and for a month and a half, I designed a house. But instead of doing what God told me to do, a friend of mine come over one day. He's an older gentleman. And he'd been in real estate for years, and he really liked me, and he trusted me. He trusted me with thousands of dollars. He'd just say, here, it's yours. Because I had proven myself faithful to this man. And he trusted me. And he told me, he said, you know, it's March of 1983, and he said, I own this lot over there on Hall Drive in Shawnee. He said, and I own that land in there. He said, why don't you go over there and build a house, and I'll take care of it. I'll finance it for you. And I thought, oh, yeah, that's what I'll do. Good idea. Then I don't need to build this one. Now, see, God didn't tell me to build this house with this guy. But it was the easy way to go. And I'm going to tell you something. You're going to listen to this? Every time that God tells you to do something that's bigger than you are, the devil's going to throw an easy thing across your pathway. That's right. And I find, are you listening? That's right. And I find that the majority of the time, the people go after the easy thing because it makes sense to them. And every time that you've done that, it will cause you to fail because it's the easy thing. And the Lord said to me this. He said, I don't want you to do that. But in my head, I couldn't figure out how I was going to go build this house when I didn't have any money and anything that I was making, I was barely surviving on. I mean, I came home from church one time in 1983, and my wife and I scraped 69 cents together to buy a bag of potato chips so that me and my 3 children and her could have Sunday lunch. That's all I had to my name. I didn't even know where I was going to get gas for my house, gas for my car. I just happened to have enough. But you know what? That's what I said. I'm going to live like this because God said I'm not moving. I said, okay, if I'm not moving, I'm staying here, and you're going to have to bless me in a sun-scorched land. Now, you know what? It's interesting because it didn't start happening the next day. You know, most people that hear from God, they think if it ain't happening the next day, they didn't hear from God.
Oh, that's right. Or they get mad at God.
Or they're mad at God. Or if it didn't happen in a week, or it didn't happen in a month, or it didn't happen in 2 months, or it didn't happen in 6 months, or it didn't happen in a year. At some point in time, they quit and say, it don't work, don't care about it no more, I misread the Bible, and then they go find themselves a church that believe nothing like they do. And that's where they spend the rest of their life. Failed, whipped dog, tail stuck between their legs, in a church that ain't going nowhere, in bondage, etc. And I said, okay, I am going to build this other house. Because he's going to finance it. Well, what happens when I get a guy who's going to finance the project for me? I'm going to split my profits. And it may never sell. So I may work for nothing. Guess what happened? I worked for 6 months on the house. And it never sold. I didn't even make wages. That ate my life up for 6 months. And I could have been doing what God said, but I couldn't figure it out how to do it and how it was going to work. But if I would have just done it, it would have worked. And I would have figured out how to do it. So I waited from February, when God said to do it, 83, to November of 83. I said, God, that other house I built, it's built. Nobody wants to buy it. It's just sitting there. This poor man's paying the interest on it. I made nothing out of it. I got myself in a jam. I feel terrible about it. And I did it because I was disobedient. Because it seemed like the easy thing to do. And guess what? It wasn't so easy after I did it. Oh my goodness. If I can teach a principle of the Word of God, that may, in my opinion, be the most important principle in the whole Word of God, is when God speaks you to do something, do it exactly the way He said, even though it makes no sense. Because I guarantee you, 100% of the time, the devil's going to throw a smoke screen your way. And every time, 100%, it's going to look easier. And that's the one we follow. But there's no blessing at the end of it. So I've learned something, and this is the principle that I've learned. Take the pressure up front so you can enjoy the fruit at the end. Take the pressure up front. Take the pressure in the beginning, because the real fruit is at the end of that pressure. But when you don't take that pressure in the beginning, and you go the easy route, there's always failure and bitterness at the end, because the Bible says the devil is a deceiver. It doesn't just say he is a deceiver, it says he is a great deceiver. And he has just deceived you from getting God's best. Now, November 1983, I said, okay, God, I'm going to build this house, because in my heart I could see that that was the thing to do. So I started building that house in November. Now, you know what the first thing that happened when I started building this house? Dug the footers, laid the block, poured the concrete on the garage floor and in the lower level, because this happened to be the design that God gave me for this house, happened to be the design that is my number one seller to this day. 14 years straight, it has been the number one selling house in my company. Last year we sold 25 or 30 of them. This design that God gave me. To this day, and will always be, because it come from God. There have been builders in this town that have copied it and went bankrupt. It's a powerful thing when you deal with God and He honors your faith and He's pleased with what you did. That's a powerful thing. And I'm telling you, you don't want to mess with it. No, I ain't tried to get that guy bankrupt. I know the guy went bankrupt. Because he came in and tried to steal all my plans. And one of the plans he stole was that plan. He's trying to sell it and put it in the newspaper like I was doing. And pretty soon he disappeared. He's living in Nashville, Tennessee. He's gone. That's an awesome thing. But I started building this house. And the first thing that happened after I got the concrete poured is I had an ice storm. The day I poured the concrete. Now, isn't that a red hot deal? I had an ice storm. Do you know what happened to the concrete? It froze. Do you know what happens when your concrete freezes? It's gone. It's history. And I said, now God, hold it. I don't have the money to pay for the first load. What am I going to do if I got to tear it out and re-pour it again? How am I going to afford this? God says, if you would have listened to me, you would have been building this in spring of 83 instead of the winter of 83. I said, oh my goodness, now I've got a foundation. Should I quit? Should I stop? What should I do, God? And he said, well, he said, you're going to have to keep going. But he said, you're going to go through some pressure that you wouldn't have had to have gone through because you were disobedient. But it will still work patience. It will still give me an experience, and it'll build my hope. And it did. It did some things to me that you can kill me, but you can't take that, what God did to me, away to my heart when he moved in. I started framing the house. I got a friend of mine. He said he would frame it with me, so he and I framed the house. I started framing the house. Got the house all up. And then I went to put the sheeting on. So I went to church one morning, and the black sheeting was stacked on my driveway. It's like December. Had 3 concrete blocks sitting on this sheeting, this black fuzzboard sheeting. Had 3 concrete blocks stacked on them. I had 4. Probably had 1 on each corner. I drove by there going to church, and seeing my faith. Now, it's winter, so it ain't a fun time to be building this thing. So, that weather has a major thing to deal with in your heart when you're in the building business. Not so much that it hurts things, it's just that it takes times 2 to do it. And what happens when it's times 2 to do something? It's minus profits. Because your price is fixed. You ain't going to get more money just because you got more money in it. You got a fixed price. You got to deal with the market. I'm driving by there Sunday morning, went to church, come home from church, and 100 sheets of fuzzboard is laying all over the field. Busted in a million pieces. Now see, it's more than just the fact I ain't got the money to pay for that fuzzboard, but now I got to buy it again, and I got to spend the next 4 days walking in a frozen field picking up all the pieces. So I get the fuzzboard and I build that into my house. And I get the house framed up and everything's fine. I got these windows, a special window that this particular supplier in town really loved. And he said, man, you got to have these windows. And he gave me a special price on these windows. So I put these windows in, and I'll tell you the story about that a little later. I put those windows in the house and everything was fine. And then I tar papered the roof. And I called my roofer up. I said, I need you to come out and roof this house right away. I need to get out of the weather. He said, no problem. It's Friday morning. He's going to come out and put, I got all these shingles piled in here. So my roofer comes out on Friday morning, around the middle of December, carries all the shingles onto the roof and stacks them on the peak. And at 10:30 in the morning, he leaves. And I can't find him anywhere. I'm looking for this guy everywhere. He's gone. I can't find him. I said, I can't believe it. He could have had the whole roof done before it got dark. That was Friday. Do you know what happened Saturday?
Oh, it's got to be a windstorm, rainstorm, snowstorm.
It wasn't good.
Yeah, right.
Temperature dropped 60 degrees. And it sleeted on the roof first. The whole roof was a solid sheet of ice. And then it started to snow. And it didn't just snow, it blew. So not only did all the paper on all the shingles get totally wet from the rain, but then it got iced up from the freezing. And I stood down here Saturday night about 7 o'clock, and it was pitch dark, and I was watching the shingles blow off the roof. One at a time. They just blew off the roof. And I got a ladder, and I tried to climb up, and I tried to scratch and claw, knock the ice. I couldn't get up on the roof. They were stacked on the peak, and the roof was a sheet of ice, and I couldn't get on the roof. I put the ladder on it, and the ladder slid on down. I couldn't get on the roof. I just stood there. I watched the wind whipping and blowing and twisting. And you know, when it snows, it does this. And of course, it takes them bundles and just twists them up and starts throwing shingles out all over the. Now, I not only haven't got the money to pay for the shingles. I not only don't have the money to pay for those shingles, because I'm in faith, but I've got the condemnation of knowing I should have started in the spring, the devil coming around saying, and this ain't going to work. And you know what's going to happen to you, big boy? You're in jail. I'm telling you the truth. That's just what he said. Now, you know, we've got to remember, I'm the only house on Walpark Road between 81 and Poling Road. It's all lonely out there. It's cold. I don't have hardly any money. Haven't had a job for months. And I'm watching the shingles peel off the roof. Now I got the third thing that I've had to do twice. Not only, it's all in the same field. I went out in the field, took my 3 little babies, and we walked the fields picking up all the shingles and bringing them back in their trash. All of them. Because I didn't listen to God. Now, did I have pressure? Would I have had pressure if I would have built it in the spring? Yeah.
Yeah, but not as much.
But because of my foolishness,
Disobedience.
now I had added pressure. I mean, I guess you look at it and say, well, what makes a difference if I can't pay for 25 squares? I may as well have 50 I owe for. But the 50 square does add a little more pressure. You know what I'm saying? And the struggle and the trial of all that. Well, you say, where did you get the money to pay for it? I didn't. I had vendors that were changing their computer systems. I had vendors that lost their invoices. Everybody lost something. And I didn't know it. Roger Niemeyer, one of the guys that owns one of the supplying companies, he came over and said, look, we're changing our computers and we lost all your files. We don't know when we're going to get them back on again. Well, I said, Roger, when you get on, just take your time. You know, I was Mr. Cool. But see, I never griped and I never complained. I just went home when I was discouraged or the devil was trying to bring discouragement on me, and I got in my prayer closet. And I'd read the Word and I'd pray and I'd say, God, talk to me. He would encourage me. I'd get back out of the room and I'd go right back down to the house and start working again. And I never, ever, one time, not one time, complained. Other than I was mad at myself. Because I knew that I had given the devil place just by starting it in November. Now, I've started a lot of houses in November since that time. And I've never lost anything. Not a thing. But I had given the devil some place when God spoke to me and told me what to do. And the pressure that I put on myself was to mold me and shape me and to build character in me, to give me the kind of strength that I need that I can stand up here tonight and talk to you the way I do. See, one of the blessings of a teacher in the body of Christ is his experiences. There's a lot of preachers that can preach a message, and you come away and say, well, that was a good message, but there's no depth to it. Well, one of the responsibilities of a teacher is to gain the experience, and that's what he teaches. Everything that I teach, I've already been there. And that's one of the qualities of a teacher. That's why teachers are so powerful in the body of Christ. And it's one of the reasons why so many churches are so anemic. Because the pastors ain't going to let nobody else fill this pulpit or teach my people. And see, what he's doing is he's limiting his congregation to what he knows. And that's not what the fivefold ministry was for. Okay? But these experiences have molded and shaped my character and built patience in me. I mean, I've got people come up that knew me 25 years ago and said, you're not the same man. You're not the same person that I used to know. I mean, are you Steve Doyle? Are you Steve Doyle? Because they don't know. They knew me 25 years ago. And I made a decision in 1978 that I'm going to submit myself to God. Period. There isn't another option. I don't have a place to turn back. And time again, I can give you hundreds of experiences just like this, that I have put myself in a position where I have chosen to step out in faith and trust God for finances. I never borrowed any money. I never went to a bank. He told me to do it. I did it. I remember my first open house. I had the house done. My first open house. Here come this family from Shawnee. They looked like they were rather affluent. You know, I didn't have the driveway in yet. It was just stone. The yard wasn't in. It was March, and we're just coming out of the snowy weather. Now, God sustained me, and it's March. And He sustained me this whole time. And here come this family coming in, and a couple of teenage daughters and a teenage son, and they're coming in, and they got their boots on. Well, they didn't walk in the driveway. They walked through the yard. Now, you got to picture this. It's the time when the snow's still on the ground, but it's melting. It's like 45 degrees out. Do you know how muddy the top of the dirt is? When there's areas where the dirt's exposed and area where there's snow, you know that kind of thing? But they didn't walk through the snow. They walked through whatever it is they walked through to go straight line into my house. And you know what they did? They opened the front door, and when I finally got there, they were walking through my whole house with their muddy boots on. My house was a disaster. It looked like I was boarding horses. And I walked over to these kids and I said, "You guys mind stepping out?" And the father came in and chewed me out. He cussed me out. Said, "You have no business having an open house here if you don't let these kids come in here and look at this. You have this open, and you ought to deserve to have this kind of thing happening. Now, you guys can sit there and say, 'Well, there ain't nobody that stupid.' I don't know if there is or not, but I guarantee you there was one that day." Knowing that pressure worketh patience, and patience worketh experience, and experience hope. We're not doing a study of patience, but if you do a study of patience, you'll find that patience will get you almost anything that you want in life. But see, there's a price to pay to get it. And if you're looking for easy street, forget it. It is not coming your way. Check it off your list. It's gone. You either have the patience, or you will always have yourself in trouble, because you're always going to be doing something stupid. Did Abraham receive a promise from God that he's going to be a father of many nations? What was Sarah's problem? Impatient. She said, "Well, I believe God, but I'm going to help him out." Do you know what that one little act of stupidity did, of impatience did? It created what nation?
Israel and Egypt.
It created the Arab nation. Guess who's been at war for 4,000 years? One little act of impatience created the Arab nation. The whole Arab nation. Ishmael. Wasn't that Hagar's son? And he was the father of the whole Arab nation. And they have been at enmity with the Jews since that day. She heard the promise. She heard what God said. But she said, "I think I'll help him out a little bit here. Things ain't happening quite like the way I'd like to see it happen." Okay? And do we do that? Was I doing that? Is that exactly what I did? I think I'll help God out here a little bit. This guy's got a little money. I think I'll go build that house, and then God can sell that one. Forget it. Doesn't work. So the wisdom of money in that case was that I didn't borrow any money. God told me not to borrow money. And my first law is the borrower is a servant to the lender. That's the first law. And we'll go on with that next week. This is the end of the second session.
This concludes tape number 2 of Steve Doyle teaching on the wisdom of money.